Okay, let's get right into this. We're looking at a fascinating strategy document today, deconstructing how a data startup called AssetOS completely transformed itself. They pivoted away from building a purely theoretical data architecture and turned into a cash-generating decision engine. If you've ever built software, analyzed data, or launched a tech product, you know exactly how easy it is to get lost in the weeds building something massive before you've even proven anyone actually wants it. This explainer is all about how to pull yourself out of that trap and build what actually matters.
We've got 5 key phases to cover in this explainer. First, the architect's trap, then decisions over data, the decision flywheel, real-world market validation, and finally, the immutable constitution. Let's hit it.
Starting off with part 1, the architect's trap, building cathedrals instead of engines.
So the source document highlights this massive critical crisis. AssetOS basically had this beautiful, complex roadmap mapped out. They had 5 whole stages planned out, going from a foundational knowledge engine to a web console, an inspector app, an owner portal, all the way up to this grand platform. It was literally a software cathedral on paper. But, and here is the kicker, they were planning all of this without a single actual customer or revenue milestone. They were completely caught in the classic engineer's trap, obsessing over the architecture of the data while totally ignoring the fact that the market just wants a simple, actionable answer.
To break out of this, the strategic review recommended a ruthless pivot. Forget the massive build for a second. Instead, the strategy was to use a really simple, straightforward valuation report for heavy equipment, think mini excavators or skid steers, as a Trojan horse. By selling these individual reports, they could immediately prove that people will actually pay for insights. Plus, they're generating revenue, capturing real-world data, and jump-starting their predictive models all at the same time. You know, you don't build the whole factory just to see if people like the product. You sell a prototype.
Moving right along to Phase 2, decisions over data, and finding the true moat.
This part absolutely shatters that old cliché we hear all the time. Data is the new oil. Actually, no. The source material brutally corrects this. Raw data is pretty much worthless on its own. I mean, if you have 1 million listings of heavy machinery and your competitor has 1 million listings, you're just tied. The real magic comes from a specific chain of actions: observation, normalization, knowledge, and finally, the big one, a definitive decision that creates an economic outcome. Structured knowledge, when perfectly applied, is the actual moat.
And that brings us to this massive conceptual shift the startup had to make. They had been pitching an asset knowledge graph, basically a system that beautifully describes what the data looks like. But let's be real, customers do not care about ontologies or event-driven pipelines. They care about making money. So the pivot was shifting to an asset decision engine. You aren't selling the graph itself, you're selling a better decision that boosts profits or cuts risks for the customer.
But wait, there is a huge warning label here. Even with that Trojan horse strategy, if you just become a company that churns out PDF valuation reports, you've lost. You're putting yourself in a crowded, cheap market. The end game isn't selling a piece of paper with a price tag on it. The goal is selling the definitive, absolute answer to the real question: should I buy this specific machine today? It's not about the valuation, it's about the action.
All right, Phase 3, the decision flywheel, creating the loop.
So how exactly do you make sure your platform gets smarter and more valuable with every single interaction? You build a closed-loop flywheel. This isn't just a linear pipeline where data goes in and just sits there. It's an active loop. The system analyzes a listing, makes a decision, like telling a fleet manager, hey, sell this specific excavator right now before you get hit with a $4,500 maintenance bill in the next 200 hours. The customer takes action. Then, crucially, the system verifies the outcome. Did that decision actually save money? That verified outcome feeds straight back into the system to make the next prediction even sharper. Every action makes the core model smarter.
Which leads to Phase 4, real-world market validation. Who is actually doing this right?
To prove this isn't just some whiteboard theory, we can look at a few global heavyweights. None of these giants just sell raw data. Take Rouse Services. They don't just hand over spreadsheets. They tell rental companies the exact week to send a machine to auction for maximum return. Samsara doesn't just show you engine telemetry. They tell you to pull a truck over instantly to dodge a $20,000 engine blowout. Palantir Skywise predicts part failures and actually routes a specific plane to the exact airport where its spare part is the cheapest. They are selling the precise, money-saving action, not the raw data.
And finally, Phase 5, the immutable constitution. These are the rules for survival.
Once AssetOS nailed down this strategy, The founders realized they actually needed to protect the system from themselves, from their own future impulses to cut corners. So they drafted a V2.0 constitution, absolute engineering laws. To enforce this, every technical choice has to pass a strict litmus test. The question is simple. If we delete the web interface or the mobile app today, does the core intelligence still exist safely underneath? This guarantees that the real brain of the system is never trapped inside some temporary application layer.
Let's run through these rules quickly. Rule 1 is domain sovereignty. Basically, business knowledge defines the system. You absolutely do not change your data structure just because an engineer found a cool new software framework they wanted to try out. The business need is the master. The technology is simply the servant.
Rule 2 demands one model, many assets. The core logic has to stay completely agnostic. Whether the system is evaluating a skid steer today, delivery vans next year, or commercial real estate 5 years from now, the foundational architecture, how it understands value, risk, and depreciation, has to be identical. All the unique differences are handled at the surface level, never in the core.
Then there's Rule 3, single source of knowledge. This reinforces that litmus test we just talked about. It completely prevents the messy duplication of logic across platforms. Your web console, your mobile app, and your API shouldn't all have separate brains calculating things differently. They are merely windows looking into the exact same, single source of truth.
Rule 4 is immutable history, and this is absolutely vital for trust. If an analyst checks the system a year from now, they have to be able to trace exactly why a specific buy or sell recommendation was made and exactly what data powered it at that exact second in time. You literally cannot learn from the past if your database is constantly overwriting it.
And Rule 5, explainable by design. This keeps the whole system grounded in human reality. If an AI model spits out a recommendation, but it's a total black box that demands blind trust, it violates the Constitution and gets rejected immediately. Every single insight has to offer a clear, human-readable explanation that a non-technical bank manager or fleet operator can understand instantly.
To lock this all down, the document outlines these final 3 absolute non-negotiables. These are blunt, unyielding directives. Never, ever delete history to save space. No recommendations without a traceable data source. And absolutely no black box machine learning models. What's wild is that changing any of these requires the unanimous consent of the founders. Not a majority vote, unanimous. It's a purposefully rigid structure to block out the short-term pressure to just ship something fast.
This whole AssetOS journey is just a masterclass in strategic alignment. Ultimately, taking a step back and looking at your own projects, you have to ask yourself a pretty hard question. Are you merely building complex architectural cathedrals, or are you actually designing an engine that makes a definitive, profitable decision for your user? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. And next time you're staring at a mountain of data, I challenge you to look at it through the lens of decisions rather than just storage.